Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lecture 4, which is an introduction to research ethics. Before we get into the issue of research ethics and the specific ethical principles you need to use when conducting sociological research, I want to start with a couple things that you might find helpful when you're working on your outline and/or your paper. And the first one is on Amazon. So if you go to Amazon and go to the page for Gang Leader for a Day, there'll be this picture that you'll see of the cover, and then it has this look inside feature. And what this look inside feature is you can click on it and basically do a text search for the book. So if you remember, if you're trying to find where a specific word was used or a specific phrase was used, you can use the look inside function to track that down. So if you're going to write about the whole issue of JT thinking that Venkatesh is writing his biography, you could put biography, you could do a text search for biography, and it should show you all the pages where in the book where that phrase comes up. Now, sometimes when you click on a page, it will show you the actual page itself, and then the word you're searching for will be highlighted. In some cases, the look inside feature will only tell you that it's on a specific page, but it won't show you the actual page on the text and where it is. But nevertheless, if you know the word you're looking for is on page 63, then you can just pick up your book and read the page and find where it's referenced. So this is a good way to track down specific quotations, or if you're trying to remember where a key event happened, you can use this to locate where the text is in the book. So if you're thinking about writing about the situation where Venkatesh chokes Bibi, you could search the word choke, you could search Bibi, you could search blue, and that will show you the pages where those matters are discussed. Now, the look inside feature normally works for me. In some cases, students have had issues where, for whatever reason, it might be related to the kind of account that someone has. Sometimes the look inside function doesn't work as well for other people as it does for me. But the good news is, if you go to our library's database and search for Gang Leader for a Day, there is an online version of the book available, and it too has, if you read the book online, it gives the ability to do a text search. And if you do that, it ends up, and here I search for the word biography, it will show you in which chapters and in which pages that word came up on. And it's a little bit tricky if you haven't used this before, but anytime you see an arrow like this, that means in this chapter that word was referenced. And here it tells you the number of times or a number of different pages where that word pops up. So in chapter 2, we see there was 2 times that the word biography came up. It was on 2 different pages. One was page 42 and one was page 51. It's just a helpful search tool. Again, if you remember a specific instance from the book, or you're trying to hunt down a specific quotation, either the look inside function from Amazon or the text search for the online version of the book that we have at the library can be very useful. All right, now let's talk about a couple of preliminary points in terms of ethical considerations one must make when conducting sociological research. The first one is you as a researcher are allowed to study illegal, unethical, or risky conduct of others, so long as you are upholding your ethical principles and obligations. So you can study people, quote unquote, doing bad things as long as you are doing the right things or you're not acting in an unethical way. And Venkatesh notes that, the history of sociology, especially at the University of Chicago, where he's a graduate student, there's a long history of sociologists studying illegal behavior or conduct that certain people might label as being immoral or unethical. But from a scientific point of view, studying those kinds of things is perfectly fine so long as you are doing so ethically. This came up because a few years back, a student turned this paper in, and I was reading her paper, and it was just off, and I couldn't make sense of what she was trying to argue. And so I ended up sitting down and talking with her. And as we were talking, I realized that her paper was not so much on whether Venkatesh acted ethically in his research, but whether it was ethical for Venkatesh to study the illegal behavior of JT and the BKs. And once I realized that the focus of her paper was off and her understanding of the topic is off, then I was able to put things in sense to say, okay, we want to go back and look at different things and have different considerations. You personally may not want to study people doing illegal things, and that's fine. That's a personal decision. If you just want to study the sociology of people doing happy things and people doing the right things, that's perfectly fine. If you do want to study people doing illegal things, that's fine too, as long as you're doing so ethically. All right. So again, there's no problem studying people doing quote unquote bad things, as long as you are upholding your ethical obligations. All right. The second point is that when you're doing research, you're often trying to balance and making trade-offs between a number of different things, and they're often competing between one another. So there's methodological concerns, there's ethical concerns, and there can be personal and moral concerns. And balancing these things is definitely more of an art than a science. And there's a number of things you need to consider, and it can be really complex. And when sociologists are doing studies, it can be really tricky to figure out which is the proper way to go. And where do ethical concerns need to trump methodological ones? Where can methodological concerns potentially trump ethical ones? Then you also have to worry about your own personal moral and ethical concerns. And that might mean that certain types of research are off the table for you just because, again, your personal and moral beliefs. A lot of sociologists and criminologists study serial killers, psychologists too. And so you're interacting with people who have done very, very terrible things. You may personally not be able to handle that or want to deal with those kinds of situations or to want to interact with people who have done those things. And that's fine. That's a personal choice. All right. But again, the main point is that you're trying to balance all these things. And often there's no one way to go. And this is why many institutions have resources available to help guide researchers when they do run into tricky situations. All right. In terms of big picture, the reason why we have ethical principles or what they're designed for is they're designed primarily to protect research subjects and the integrity of the research process, not so much to protect the researcher and his or her safety. That's an important concern, but the ethical principles we talked about are more geared towards protecting subjects, right, who is being studied, and the integrity of the research process, right, making sure that research is being done in an honest and upfront and upright manner. So what this means is, as a researcher, even though people may advise you against it and say you shouldn't do it, you are allowed to put yourself in risky situations as long as you are making that decision on your own. So Venkatesh, studying this community, he was putting himself at some risk, right? We saw that there was a drive-by shooting in the book, okay? So he's at risk, an enhanced risk of being in this community as opposed to if he was just crunching numbers over at the University of Chicago. But he put himself in this situation. He's freely choosing to study this community, so that is fine. The principles that we're going to talk about aren't designed to protect him and that kind of decision that he's making. It's designed to protect the subjects of the research and then also the research process to make sure it's conducted with integrity. All right, then why do we need ethical principles? The main one is that good methods are not always ethical. Often, the best methodological procedures for testing something, right, the way that would really solve the way that would best solve or best answer a question, we can't do because ethical concerns trump the methodological ones. The classic example of this would be right in between, say, sociology and psychology. Right, one of the main questions that we deal with is: are we the products of nature or nurture? Right, so are we born basically the way we're going to be? So we're genetically determined, or do social factors shape and influence us in some profound ways? And this is a debate that's been going on for centuries and millennia. Well, we could actually solve this pretty easily. And the thing you would do is you would just take, and you need a pretty big sample size. So let's say we'd come up with, we'd find 1,000 sets of identical twins, and we would take those from the parents, and we would raise those twins in very different social environments. And then we would look at the twins later in life to see how identical or dissimilar they are. And if it turns out that these twins raised in really different environments are still really identical, right? They have the same preferences and things like that, then that's a pretty good indicator that we are the products of nature. If, however, these twins that grow up in different social environments are different kinds of people, then that's a pretty good indicator that nurture is at work. This would be a perfect and elegant way to solve this debate, and we can't do it because it's unethical. Right? It's not fair to take children away from their parents, and even in cases where, say, twins are given up for adoption, there's a strong case to be made that unless there are compelling reasons why this can happen, to keep those pairs of siblings together so they can grow up as twins. So again, methodologically, doing that kind of study would be perfect, but ethically, we can't do it. The problem is sometimes people's ambitions to come up with really good knowledge or to use good methods that are unethical, right? Sometimes people can be so compelled by those that they will do unethical things, right, or can lead them down that path. And so that's why we have these ethical principles in place, is to prevent people from going down that road. So Babby brings this up in terms of the people taking the bar exam. Forcing people to take that survey methodologically is great because you're getting everyone's responses, right? So you don't have to worry about people, say half the people not filling out that survey, and then you always have to worry about whether the people who filled out the survey are different from the people who refused, and that could lead to you could get a biased result if there are certain people who are opting out from taking a survey. If you can force everyone to do it, that's great. All right, you've got a complete data set. But that's unethical because you can't force people to be part of a research project. You have to give them the choice of whether they want to be part of it or not. Similarly, when Venkatesh tries to corroborate what he's seen in his Hustler studies with JT and Miss Bailey, from a methodological perspective, that's not a bad idea, right? Because that's getting another source of information about a topic that he's studying. So it's a way of trying to triangulate his data. So methodologically, great idea. Ethically, a terrible idea for reasons that were pretty clear in the book. All right. So there can always be this temptation where good methods could get us to act in ways that would either harm our the main thing is that good methods can set us up so that we end up harming our research subjects. So we put ethical principles in place to protect research subjects and to make sure that they are not harmed by the research that we do.